Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to make a couple of cards with some rainbow ink blending. Hope you enjoy! So for this card I started with a piece of paper that's 5 by 7 inches and I used one of the larger sticker stencils. This is from the Lavinia Stamps sticker stencil set 7. And as you can tell, I've used this sticker stencil a few times, and that stops it from destroying the paper by picking it up accidentally. Sometimes I like to rub my stamp cleaner over the back of it as well, just to remove some of the stickiness, which is why it does look a little bit dirty. So I'm starting my rainbow ink blending with some Wilted Violet Distress ink, just along the left-hand side there. And I had an idea of putting this underwater, so I want the outside color, which will be blue, to go well with the outside color of this vase. So purple and blue go well together. And I'm also going to blend a bit of the Salty Ocean on the right-hand side of this Wilted Violet Distress ink as well. Now I'm using some miniature blending brushes, which are quite tiny, and they make blending inside this stencil quite easy. I picked these up at a craft sale in Birmingham in the UK, but you could also use miniature brushes or miniature blending tools, whichever you prefer. But I do find having smaller blending brushes like these make blending inside of a stencil so much easier. Now the only downside with small brushes is that you need to keep putting ink on, because as you can see they don't hold much ink. But it does allow you to get this beautiful rainbow blending and add several colors. So I was thinking for this rainbow effect that I would have my brightest or lightest color in the middle of the vase. So that's what I'm sort of aiming on as I'm adding these rainbow colors. So the Squeeze Lemonade, which is this color here, I'm going to use my larger blending brush, and I'm going to blend that in the middle of the vase, up the stem a little bit, and this will be the largest area. And after I add each color, I'm just going back to the previous color and then blending them together. So after I add this orange or this carved pumpkin on the right-hand side, I'm going to go back again to that Squeeze Lemonade and blend them together. And that way I get this beautiful blend. And then because I'm using such small brushes, I can keep adding more color. And this lumberjack plaid is so dark that it contrasts really well with that Squeeze Lemonade. So you get this very dramatic rainbow, which I think looks great. And I think the Wilted Violet on the left-hand side is so dark as well. I will darken it up a little bit more as we go, that those colors just really pop against that light Squeeze Lemonade in the middle of the vase. So once I'm happy with those colors on the right-hand side, I'm just going to add a little bit more of that Wilted Violet just on the edge there. And then I can add more of that color towards the top of the vase as well. And this was a long process, so I'm going to speed up the ink blending a bit here so that I'm not spending the entire video blending. But I'm going to add more of this ink along the top, right where the edge of the vase is, making sure to add that beautiful Wilted Violet along the outside, along the whole vase. And then I'm going to add some of that Salty Ocean along the top as well, and then darken the Salty Ocean on the left-hand side of the vase. So just going back and forth between the colors helps to build it up and makes it more vibrant and blends them really well together. And then as I remove that mask, you can see that beautiful vase. Now I do have a little bit of sticky stuff stuck on my paper, so I'm just going to lightly brush that off. And I would recommend, like I said, using your sticker stencil a few times on scrap paper and things like that before putting it on your project. Now, just to make sure this is completely dry, I'm going to heat it with my heat tool. And then I can work on the outside of the vase. So I'm going to put the other part of the stencil in, which covers the vase. This is a little bit difficult to line up, so it did take a couple tries, and I still wasn't perfect in the end, but it was good enough. And then I can start decorating around the vase. Now I started adding a very light blue. This is tumbled glass distress ink. And after adding some around the outside, I realized it was too light of a color to go with that wilted violet, the beautiful purple that we have on the outside of the vase. So I left it on, and then I just decided in the end that I would darken this color. So sometimes you need to try an ink color beside another just to see how you like it. So what I ended up doing was I used some of the chipped sapphire, which is a very dark blue. And I thought this would look better, but it's a little bit too dark. So I used that around the outside and then decided what I really needed was a color in between those two. So I went back to that salty ocean that we put on the inside of the vase, and I blended that around the vase instead. And you can see that color works so much better with that wilted violet. So I continue to blend this around the entire area of the vase. And as you can see, there's a little bit of white peeking through on the right-hand side of the vase, but I will fix that later. That's just because I didn't line up the stencil exactly as it should be. So I'm happy with the way that this salty ocean looks around this vase. So I'm going to continue blending it, and then I'm going to add in some more ink colors as we go. So I did add a bit more of that tumbled glass just to blend the two colors together. And then I decided to make it even more dramatic and darker by adding some of that beautiful chipped sapphire, which is that beautiful dark blue. So I'm going to blend that along the edges here. And then I'll blend it at the top edges as well, and underneath the vase at the bottom. And I'm just going to go back and forth between that and the salty ocean to blend them together. And I will add more of this ink later on in the video as well, just to help ground the vase. So I'm going to repeat this on the other side of the card, adding the chipped sapphire along the edges, and then blending it out with that salty ocean distress ink. And one of the reasons I love distress ink so much, as you'll see in this card, is that you can keep building up the colors and adding the distress ink on top of other colors until you're happy with the effect that you get. And now I have this beautiful background that looks great. So now I'm going to carefully remove the mask and then make sure this vase is completely dry before moving on. So you can see the area on the right hand side where I didn't line the mask up properly, but that's okay, I'll fix it. And here you can see the two versions of the card that I'm making, one with the blue background and one without. So I ended up using some blue Copic markers just to color in this white area. And I started with a light blue, which seems to work quite well, but switching to a darker blue really does the trick. If you don't have Copic markers, you could always use colored pencils instead, or you could carefully line up the mask a little bit better than I did. So once that's done, I'm going to add on the first mask again, because I prefer making this card in stages, and then I can decorate the inside of the vase. So I started by adding a couple stamps. The first one I added is called Urchins, and it's going to go along the bottom edge, and I used some VersaFine Clair Nocturne for this. And I just carefully stamped this, being careful to put the pressure on the paper part of the card rather than the plasticky mask, because it can make your stamp slide a little bit. And then I just used my stamp cleaner to clean off the area of the mask which has the ink on it. This is just so that I don't accidentally smudge the ink with my hand, as I've done in the past. And then I added some sea algae, and this one is quite long. So what I did is I used a bit of a scrap piece of paper and some VersaFine Clair ink. This is in Warm Breeze, and I just stamped the length that I wanted onto my background. Now I know this stamp doesn't fit perfectly with those urchins at the bottom, but any areas that don't fit perfectly, I can always fix with a pen later on. And I'm just going to rotate this stamp and use it again at the top corner of the vase, just on the left here. Again, I'm putting the pressure on the paper rather than on the mask so it doesn't slip. And I think this looks quite nice upside down or right side up as well. And that Warm Breeze color looks brilliant over these rainbow colors too. And again, I'm just wiping off that ink so I don't accidentally smudge it anywhere. Just gorgeous. So there's a few different stamps that are fish in the Lavinia world, and I'm going to use one of the bigger ones. This is part of the fish set, which has 2 fish in it, and I'm going to stamp him right here towards that sea algae. And I'm just using the Nocturne ink for that. And then I can start adding some bubbles in as well. So these tiny bubble stamps are a set of 3 stamps, and I ended up using the middle-sized one and the smaller one. So I didn't end up using the bigger bubble today. And I've just zoomed in here so that you can see the coloring of those urchins. And I used some Stardust sparkle pens. And I just followed the rainbow order. And I just ended up using 4 of these pens. So I used the green. Well, it's actually, the first one I used is the rose. And then I used the blue, and then the green, and then the silver. And just the green on the fish's scales here, the pink on his fins, and the pink on his lips. And I also did the pebbles at the bottom, but I did these off camera. And I used the same pens to go around all the bubbles, so they've got a little bit of sparkle in them. And that rainbow color also helps to make them look more like bubbles too. So I just went around each of the bubbles with one of those rainbow colors and then joined them up like that. And to make them look even more like bubbles, I just spritzed a little bit of water on my craft desk, and using a paintbrush, I just colored in all the bubbles. And this water will react with the distress inks and also blend those pen colors together. Then I just used a piece of paper towel to blot it off and dried it with my heat tool. And you can see those areas brightened up significantly. And then I just used a white gel pen to add some highlights. And those bubbles look great. I also added some more white details. So I added some little stars with a kind of circle in the middle. And that, I think, helps to make it look a bit more magical, almost like this vase is sparkling underwater. And then I added some white lines as well around the outside of the vase. And I did this on both of the vases. I'll show the other one in a moment. But I think with the rainbow colors and these white details, it looks quite effective. Just gorgeous. So once I was finished with that, I just added some stamps on the outside. So this little stamp is one of 2 stamps that's in the Lavinia set called Twisted Vine set. And I like this one because I think it works well as grass or as vines. And you could put the mask in and have this going behind this vase, but I sort of like the effect of it in front of the vase as well. And then using some of the Nocturne ink, I added more of those bubbles. Again, I used the middle-sized bubble and the smaller bubble, and just put them randomly around the background. And I did the same on my other card as well. So added the vines and the bubbles, and then colored all the bubbles in similarly like I did before. And then using one of the Lavinia masks, I just added more of that chipped sapphire ink along the bottom just to help ground that vase. On the other background, I decided that I would use some of that wilted violet instead. So I put this along the bottom as well. You could also add a brown color if you wanted to go for sand, but I thought the wilted violet worked so well, and I'm always looking for an excuse to add purple. So you can see the 2 different variations of this with the white background and the blue background. They look so different, but they're both quite beautiful. So you could stop here, but I decided I needed some sentiment on the front of the card. So I put these onto a card base and then added, this is the Nimbus stencil from Lavinia Stamps. And I'm just using that same chipped sapphire without adding any extra ink on my ink blending brush, and just swiped it on the right hand side there, so that I can use this just to brighten up the inside of the card. And then I used 3 of the stickers from the Sentiment sticker set number 6. That one says Wish Dream. This one is Keep Moving Forward. And then the last one is You Got This. So it's a great encouragement card. And I did the same thing on the other card, but used white stickers instead. And on the inside, used that wilted violet with that Nimbus stencil. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this video inspiring. If you haven't already, please subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!